The Boxcar Children's Surprise Island, Chapter 6, The Museum. Joe and the children sat around the table to look at the books. Henry took off the paper and found 12 interesting looking books. The butterfly book, said Jessie. The shell book, said Violet. The flower book, said Henry. Oh, these 3 books must belong to a set. Just look at the beautiful pictures. The handyman seemed to be just as interested as the children. He soon found a picture of the purple flower on the table. It was the beach pea. Then Joe showed the children the names of the shells that they had found. He saw that Henry was staring at him. How did you ever learn all this? Asked Henry. Oh, I just picked it up, said Joe. I used to live near the beach. Joe saw that he would have to be more careful because it appeared that he knew too much for a handyman. And so he said he would go to get back to work. After Joe had gone, Henry said, Let's look upstairs. He ran up the stairs, and the others followed with the dog. First, Henry opened the big windows. Then he looked around the room. The pile of straw was at one end. In the corner stood an old straight-backed chair. Jessie went over and shook it. Wonderful, said Jessie. We'll use that when Grandfather comes to call. To think of having a real guest chair. I wish we had some boards, said Henry. I thought we might find some up here. What's this? Asked Benny. Boards, shouted Henry. Some 8-foot boards were piled on the floor under the straw. Well now, cried Henry, how lucky we are. I'll get to work right away. I can carry these boards down under the trees and saw them to make tables. I ought to dry the flowers, said Jessie. Violet can look up their names, and Benny can help carry down the boards. We have to have lots of newspapers for drying the flowers, said Violet, going downstairs, and we haven't a single newspaper. Joe has, said Benny, to everyone's surprise. He gets 2 every day, so he must have a lot. You go ask him, Benny, will you? Said Violet. Just ask him for old ones, be sure to thank Joe. When Benny arrived at Captain Daniel's hut, he knocked at the door. Hello, called a voice. Benny walked around to the other side of the hut. Joe and the captain sat there cleaning fish. Have you any old newspapers? Asked Benny. Not to read, but to dry flowers between. Well, we certainly have, said Joe, smiling. He pointed at some piles of old newspapers. Oh, 1 pile will be enough, cried Benny, delighted. Jessie only wanted a dozen. Thank you, Joe. She will be surprised. Jessie was surprised and very pleased. Have you a thin board about 10 foot long? She called to Henry. How's this? Asked Henry. Perfect. Go get it, Benny, said Jessie. But she had used the wrong words for Benny and the right words for watch. When the dog heard go get it, he ran out of the barn to Henry, who put the board carefully in the dog's mouth. Then Watch ran back and laid the board at Jessie's feet. Jessie was so pleased that she stopped her work and gave him a piece of bread. The girls smoothed the flowers out on the newspapers, just as they had done in school. Then they covered the flowers with more papers and a board and put a large stone on top. I hear a motorboat, said Henry. I'm going down to see, said Benny. There might be something for us. Jessie said, Don't be too sure. To her surprise, he came back in a few minutes with a big box. We did get something, he cried. It's from Grandfather. Captain Daniel said so. Henry opened the big box. Sweaters, he said. Benny took his at once. I know mine is the red one, he said, and I guess that purple one is for Violet. There was a beautiful blue one for Jessie and a brown one for Henry. They all put them on to see how they looked. Grandfather thinks it's going to get cold, said Jessie. So do I, answered Henry. I think we shall be glad of these presents very soon. When Jessie woke up late that night, she heard rain falling on the roof of the barn. She put on her shoes and shut all the windows. Henry got up to help shut the barn door. Now I guess we'll keep dry, she whispered. The rain is coming in somewhere, said Jessie softly. She listened as they could hear the sound of water dripping near the stove. We mustn't let the stove get wet, cried Henry, speaking out loud. Get the big kettle. Henry put it under the stream of water. The water seemed to come faster and faster into the kettle. We can't go to sleep because the kettle might run over, said Henry, after a minute. What's the matter, Jessie? Called Benny in a sleepy voice. Rain is coming through the roof, said Henry. Go back to sleep. And there they are, putting the little bucket under the water. I can't, cried Benny. Rain is coming in on my window, too, and it's all over me. Oh, dear, cried Jessie. Where's the flashlight? With the flashlight, the two older children soon saw that the wall near Benny's bed was very wet. A stream of water was running in under the window. Get up, Benny, cried Henry. Benny came out slowly. I don't like this bed, he said. He began to cry. I like my bed at Grandfather's house, and I want to go home. It's nice and dry there. Now, Benny, don't be like that, cried Jessie. You're a big boy, and you ought to be up helping us. You wouldn't like it if we left you at home, would you? Well, no, said Benny. The idea woke him up, and he started to help move out his bed. What's the matter? Called Violet. It's raining in this barn, said Benny. Maybe on you, too. No, it's not, said Violet. But I can hear it coming in somewhere. It's coming in all over the place, cried Henry. I wish we had more kettles, said Jessie. I'll put one pail under this window and the other pail in the corner. We can't go to sleep, said Violet. The pails and kettle will run over. The rest of you can go to sleep, said Henry. I will stay up and empty the pails. Benny, you get into bed. I think we have found a place where the rain is coming in. Benny was glad to get into bed, and he was soon asleep again. Henry sat up for an hour. He emptied the pails once more, and then crawled in beside Benny. The rain had almost stopped. I'll fix the roof tomorrow, he thought, and maybe Joe will help me. He's a very handy man. The next morning it was still raining. The children dressed and ate breakfast and then watched the rain. One of us must go outside for the groceries, said Henry, and I think I'm the one. My clothes are going to get awfully wet, so what shall I do while they dry? Where are all your other clothes? Asked Benny. Henry pointed to the clothesline over the stove. They aren't dry yet, said Jessie. I'm sorry, now that I washed them. Henry can go to bed while his clothes dry, said Benny. Say, listen, Benny, cried Henry. How would you like to go to bed? You get busy and think of something I can put on. Jessie could make you a suit out of that blanket, said Benny suddenly. I really could, cried Jessie. It's lucky we brought along Violet's work bag. I'll make you a pair of pants out of that blanket, and you can put on your new sweater while your things keep drying. Good for you, Jessie, said Henry. Now let's be sure we have thought of everything we want. I won't have to go out again. I have an idea, said Benny. Why don't you put on your swimming suit to go outside, and then your clothes won't get wet? Hey, that's a good idea, Benny. What would we do without you, said Henry. Benny, you are wonderful, agreed Jessie. Benny laughed and said, I know you could make pants out of a blanket if you had to. I'll put on my swimming suit, said Henry. You be thinking of what you want. Jessie said, there will be some potatoes in the box because I ordered them, and all the bread and milk. Do you think you can carry it all? I'm going to make some clam chowder, and I'll need onions from the garden. The onions aren't very big, but they're big enough. I'll get the onions first, said Henry, appearing in his swimming suit, and give them to you through the door. I think I can carry everything else. Henry handed the little onions to Jessie through the partly open door. When he came in with the basket of groceries, he looked as if he had been swimming. After a rub-down with his towel, Henry put on his dry clothes and was ready for work. This is a perfect day to work on our museum things, he said. I can make some boxes for the shells and butterflies. Soon the table was covered with wood, paper, paints, and tools. At 11:30, Jessie stopped her work to make the chowder. I'm going to use these little onions for the chowder, she said. Jessie melted some butter and put the onions in it. Then she added water and salt and sliced potatoes. When the potatoes were done, she added the cut-up clams, and at the very last minute, the milk. Soon, when dinner was ready, the four children took their bowls of chowder and sat down, not minding the rain at all. Jessie, you can make anything, cried Henry. Yum, yum! Jessie can make good chowder, said Benny. After dinner, the children painted birds and fixed the feathery seaweed for the museum. Henry went upstairs to put up the tables. By the time it was dark, the Alden Museum was very well started. I think the birds are the best thing in the museum, said Benny, but Benny did not know what they were to find the next day.